Shalom, shalom. Most High in Christ bless. Good morning. It is Sunday, March 21st, and we like to thank you all for tuning in to Israel United in Christ on WGAI 560 AM radio. For more information, our website is www.israelunite.org. Again, that website is www.israelunite.org. Our number is 1-855-484-4842, extension 798. Again, the number is 1-855-484-4842, extension 798. We are not a hate group. We are not affiliated with any other Israelite group or black militia group. Israel United in Christ is a non-violent, Bible-based movement. We do not advocate or condone any acts of violence against any race, ethnicity, or gender. We advise that if anyone hear or know of any plots to cause harm to anyone or to break the laws of the land, you must contact the proper authorities to bring awareness to any possible threat, as stated in Leviticus chapter 5, verse 1 of the King James Bible. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Our host is
Captain Josiah, Officer Nahum,
Brother Elijah,
and Officer Issachar. Also, today, what is our topic, Captain Josiah?
Yes, sir. Today's topic is going to be, is the Apocrypha canon? Okay, is it canon? And that literally just means, it's a simple term for, is it a valid book? Okay, is the Apocrypha canon? So let's begin with John chapter 8, verse 32. The book of John chapter 8, verse 32.
The book of John chapter 8 and verse 32. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
Okay, read it again.
The book of John chapter 8 and verse 32. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. The truth is that you so-called blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans of the diaspora are the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, let's begin with, let's jump to this book right here. Okay, again, today's topic is the Apocrypha canon. And let's spell that word for them real quick, Officer Nahum. Spell that word Apocrypha so they know what we're talking about.
Apocrypha, A-P-O-C-R-Y-P-H-A.
Okay, Apocrypha. So now what this particular book is, it contains 14 books within it, okay, that were originally in the 1611 King James Version when it was originally translated. Okay, most of your Bibles today, if you just go to a regular bookstore or Walmart or whatever the case, it's not going to include those books in it. They were removed at one particular time during the 1700s, and it's been propaganda, lies, and so forth saying the books are not valid or canon. So we come to edify you all and show you that those books are canon and they are part of the Bible. Let's start with this particular book here.
The title of the book is A Short History of Western Civilization, Volume 1, written by Harrison Sullivan.
All right.
We are on page 36. The most significant of the small nations for the history of Western civilization.
Now it says the most significant of the small nations of Western civilization, meaning on this side of the world, on the West. Go ahead.
Was that of the Hebrews.
That of who?
Was that of the Hebrews.
So it's saying the most significant nation here in the West is the Hebrews. Okay, go ahead.
To do them justice in a brief account is virtually impossible.
So to do us justice, we are the Hebrews, by the way. When I started off and said the so-called black, Hispanic, and Native American of the diaspora are the 12 tribes, that's saying you are the Hebrews as well. The Hebrews are the 12 tribes. It's the same people. So read it again from the top.
The most significant of the small nations for the history of Western civilization was that of the Hebrews.
Go ahead.
To do them justice in a brief account is virtually impossible. For few people have evoked greater interest.
Few people have evoked greater interest than the Hebrews, than the 12 tribes. Go ahead.
Or more intensive study. We are aided in telling their story.
We are helped by telling the story of the Hebrews. Go ahead.
By a magnificent literary record they created.
It says they created a literary work they created. Go ahead.
Their Bible.
The Bible was created for and by the Hebrews. Okay, go ahead.
called the Old Testament in the Christian world.
And it's called the Old Testament in the Christian world. But that's the history of the Hebrews. Guess what the New Testament is? The history of the Hebrews. Guess what the Apocrypha is? The history of the Hebrews. Go ahead.
Composed over a long period of time out of mixture of historical traditions, legal enactments, moral exhortations, and speculation.
Right, and it says speculation because why? They'll tell you that the so-called Negro in America is from Africa. He's African American, so forth and so on. But no, the Bible defines him, as an Israelite. Okay, like I said, those of the diaspora, those that were sold on slaves, ships, and so forth, they make up the 12 tribes of Israel. So that's why I said speculation, because it conflicts with historical traditions, quote unquote. Read on.
This book raises innumerable problems for the historian.
And there it is again. It raises problems for the historian. Why? Because they tell you, as a so-called Negro or the Hispanics, Mexicans, and so forth, that they're just Mexicans, for example, not the tribe of Issachar. Okay, go ahead.
But it does provide an historical record far superior to that produced by any other ancient Near Eastern people.
Right. So the Bible provides a what? Read that part again.
It says, but it does provide an historical record far superior.
That's the point right there. Far superior than what?
To that produced by any other ancient Near Eastern people. The main outlines of the story it tells have been corroborated by other literary documents and by archaeology.
Right, by archaeology. So what it's saying is the Bible within in itself is the most accurate historical record of the Hebrews that you can find. It's not a quote unquote religious book. It's not. The Bible doesn't mention to be a Baptist, a Pentecostal, a Presbyterian, a Methodist, a Catholic. Okay, this is the history of the Hebrews. Is that it, or is there more than that?
There's a last sentence.
Okay, go ahead.
And it can be read as a serious introduction to Hebrew history.
Right, there it is. The Bible can be read as a serious introduction into Hebrew history. The Bible is a history book. All right, so now, back to the topic, just as a reference, is the book called the Apocrypha canon? Is it a valid book according to God? All right. Let's start with Genesis 15 and verse 13 real quick. And we're going to try to run through some of these rather quick. We ask y'all every week to get your pens, papers, take notes. If you have your Bible, follow along with us, okay? And go back to these points later on throughout the week. Genesis 15 verse 13.
All right. The book of Genesis, chapter 15 and verse 13. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years.
Right, so this was a prophecy given to Abraham, or Abram, that his seed, the children that came out of his loins, would be afflicted for 400 years. Give me Exodus chapter 12. And start at, you know what, go to Exodus 1, start at verse 8.
The book of Exodus, chapter 1 and verse 8. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we.
Yep.
Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land.
Right, go ahead.
Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens.
This is the beginning of the burdens, the 400 years, okay? They set over us taskmasters to afflict us with burdens. Go ahead.
And they built for Pharaoh treasured cities, Pithom and Ramses.
Jump down to verse 13.
Verse 13, and the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigor, and they made their lives bitter with hard bondage in mortar and in brick.
In mortar and in brick. This is the affliction that was prophesied unto Abraham. Give me now, jump to Exodus 12 And give me verse 29.
The book of Exodus, chapter 12 and verse 29. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle.
Go ahead.
And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead.
So now, this is the last plague of Egypt, okay, where he killed all the firstborn of the Egyptians, cattle and everything, okay? Everybody had death within their family amongst the Egyptians, okay? These are so-called black nations, okay? The Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians. Now give me 12, verse 37. Start at 37.
Verse 37. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth, about 600,000 on foot that were men, beside children.
So it says they journeyed from Ramses. Okay, it's telling you the king that ruled when the children of Israel were led out of Egypt. Okay, is that it?
That's it for the verse.
Okay, so that's it. So the point we want to reference here is historically the children of Israel were slaves in Egypt. This is historically accurate. Like the book we started off says, this history can be proven through archaeology. When you go through the tombs and whatnot of Egypt, you can see images on the walls of the children of Israel there. Okay, this is Hebrew history right here. Jump to 2 Kings, and we're going to move to the next quote-unquote captivity, okay, called the Assyrian Captivity. Okay, this was from 2 Kings. Give me chapter 15.
In verse.
And start at 27.
The book of 2 Kings, chapter 15 and verse 27. And the 52nd year of Azariah, king of Judah, Pekah, the son of Remaliah, began to reign over Israel and Samaria, and reigned 20 years. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. In the days of Pekah, king of Israel, came Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria.
So that's what we want right there. Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria. Go ahead.
And took Ijon, and Abelebeth-Makkah, and Genoa, and Kadesh, and Hazor, and Gilead, and Galilee, all the land of Naphtali, and carried them captives to Assyria.
So now, this is the beginning of the Assyrian captivity. Israel was taken in captivity in waves, right? Different waves they were taken into Assyria. Okay, jump to chapter 17. Okay, now again, the Assyrian captivity, once again, this is historically accurate. This is the history of the Hebrews. Today is modern day Kurdistan. All right, 2 Kings 17 verse 1.
All right, the book of 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 1. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah, began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years.
Go ahead.
And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him. Against him came Shalman.
Read verse 1 one more time.
The book of 2 Kings chapter 17 and verse 1. In the 12th year of Ahaz, king of Judah.
Now, notice it says the king Ahaz, or Ahaz, the king of Judah, right? Go ahead.
Began Hoshea, the son of Elah, to reign in Samaria over Israel 9 years.
So the point I want you guys to see in this verse is the kingdom of Israel was split into two at this particular time, all right? Read on.
Verse 2. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, but not as the kings of Israel that were before him.
Go ahead.
Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents.
So now it says, against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and said what? Read it again, that last verse.
Verse 3. Against him came up Shalmaneser, king of Assyria, and Hoshea became his servant and gave him presents.
Right. So again, Israel was taken into Assyria in different waves. Okay, you had different kings from Assyria that came and conquered. Now this is around 722 BC. Okay, the Assyrian Empire was from about 722 BC to about 605 BC. Give me Tobit. We're going to the Apocrypha now to read the exact same history here that we just read in 2 Kings. Okay, This is a precept showing you that the Apocrypha is canon. Tobit chapter 1, start at verse 1.
The book of Tobit, chapter 1 and verse 1. The book of the words of Tobit, son of Tobiel, the son of Ananiel, the son of Adul, the son of Gabiel, of the seed of Asael, of the tribe of Naphtali, who in the time of Manassas, king of the Assyrians.
Now that Manassas is the same Shalmaneser we just read in the book of 2 Kings. It's the same person. Read it again.
Verse 2. Who in the time of Manassas, king of the Assyrians, was led captive out of Thisbe, which is in the right hand of that city, which is called properly Naphtali and Galilee above Asher.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I'm going to bring this up right here, like how Captain brought out King Solomon's name. As we're reading in Tobit, when you read the Apocrypha, this is written in Greek. This is how his name is pronounced in Greek. And you see, like Asher, it don't have the H in it, so it's just, but it's the same place. I just want to bring that out.
Right. Thank you. So this is the Greek. So basically, we're reading it in English now, but you're reading the Greek translation here versus the Hebrew translation into English in 2 Kings. Thank you. Go ahead.
Verse 3. I, Tobit, have walked all the days of my life in the way of truth and justice. And I did many alms deeds to my brethren and my nation, who came with me to Nineveh, into the land of the Assyrians.
It says he came to where?
He came with me to Nineveh, into the land of the Assyrians.
So now, what other historical book does the Bible mention Nineveh? You want to touch on that real quick?
Yeah. Let me get Tobit chapter 14 and verse 4. And for all the Christians and people that don't have the Apocrypha, when you read the Bible, you're going to get to a book called Jonah, and you're going to read about Jonah. Let's see where Jonah went in the Apocrypha. Go ahead.
The book of Tobit, chapter 14 and verse 4. Go into Media, my son, for I surely believe those things which Jonas the prophet spake of Nineveh.
So Jonah spoke of Nineveh. He was made to go to Nineveh, right? So it ties in just like officer. Can I get one more scripture? Romans 15:4, real quick. Why is it important to be able to connect the histories like Captain is doing? Captain is going from different captivities, showing you that it connects to the Apocrypha. Everything's important, right? Go ahead.
The book of Romans, chapter 15 and verse 4.
Bring it out.
For whatsoever things were written aforetime.
The whole Bible, from Genesis to Revelations, including the Apocrypha, was written before any of us were alive. All right, it's 2021. It was written before that, right? Read.
Were written for our learning.
So all scripture is profitable for instruction, correction, righteousness. All right, then we read that in Timothy's. Go ahead.
That we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope.
So when we dabble into the scriptures and historically break down who everybody is on earth, we find out that we're the Israelites. And now we can understand hope. We can understand salvation. We can understand that the Bible was written for us, to us, and about us. All right. So when we go back to Tobit 14 verse 4 real quick.
The book of Tobit, chapter 14 and verse 4. Go into Media, my son, for I surely believe those things which Jonas the prophet spake of Nineveh, that it shall be overthrown, and that for a time peace shall rather be in Media, and that our brethren shall lie scattered in the earth from that good land, and Jerusalem shall be desolate, and the house of God in it shall be burned, and shall be desolate for a time.
So the point you want to get is that everything ties back. The Old Testament, New Testament, and Apocrypha, they all come together. Go ahead.
Right, and just as a reference, the Jonas or Jonah that we're reading about here is the same Jonah you read about, like you said, in the Old Testament. The same guy that was in the belly of the whale. It's the same brother. Okay, you want to touch on something?
Yeah. Give me the book of 2 Kings, chapter 19. We're gonna start at verse 35. So I'm just gonna kind of brief you up real quick on a little history. So we got King Hezekiah, and he had this king here that the same king they're gonna be talking about in Tobit here, called Sennacherib. Okay. He came to do war against Judah, in Jerusalem. But something happened in this history, and also I can bring you back to show you that it talks about the same history in this book here, in the book, the Apocrypha. So give me that in 2 Kings chapter 19 and verse 35.
All right, the book of 2 Kings chapter 19 and verse 35. And it came to pass that night that the angel of the Lord went out and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. And when they arose early in the morning, behold, they were all dead corpses.
Right. So the angel of the Lord came down there and killed the Assyrians that came up to fight against Judah, fight against the southern kingdom, Judah, Benjamin, and Levi here in Jerusalem. Read verse 36.
So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh.
So now he went to his homeland, his country, which is Nineveh. Nineveh today will be in Iraq, what you would call Mosul, Iraq. The ruins of Nineveh is right there in that city. Okay, read.
Verse 37, and it came to pass, as he was worshipping in the house of Nisroch his god, that Adrammelech and Sherezer his son smote him with the sword.
Right.
And they escaped into the land of Armenia, and Esarhaddon his son reigned in his stead.
Right, so we're going to read the same history here real quick. It's going to be real fast. Give me Tobit chapter 1, and we're going to start at verse
21.
21. Yeah.
And again, just to reference, Tobit is in the Apocrypha once again.
All right, the book of Tobit, chapter 1 and verse 21. And there passed not 55 days before two of his sons killed him.
Right, so we just read this here in 2 Kings, the book of 2 Kings, chapter 19, verse 37. Read.
And they fled into the mountains of Ararat.
Read.
And Sarchedonius, his son, reigned in his stead.
Right, so now his other son reigned in his stead, right? But when we see it here, it says, and Esarhaddon, you know what I'm saying? That's the name that we read about in the Bible. But you read the name here, you know, this is his Greek name here. Read. Who
appointed over his father's accounts and over all his affairs, Achiacharis, my brother Anael's son.
Right. So there's one point I want to get to.
Hey, if you jump to 18, it tells you who the guy is, who the king was.
Yeah,
in.
That's what I wanted. Yeah, thank you.
The book of Tobit, chapter 1 and verse 18. Mm-hmm. And if the king Sennacherib had slain any, when he was come and fled from Judea.
That's the part there that I want right there. That's the key part. It said because he killed a lot of our people, and it says, and when he was fled from Judea. I had read this before when I had read this story. I didn't have this other history here. Then I was wondering, like, what does that mean that he fled from Judea? So you remember in history, his army got killed by the angel, and he left and he fled and he went back to. Matter of fact, let's get that. Give me 2 Kings chapter 19 and verse 36. Read that.
The book of 2 Kings chapter 19 and verse 36. So Sennacherib, king of Israel, departed.
The king of Assyria.
King of Assyria departed and went and returned and dwelt at Nineveh.
Right, he went and returned and dwelt in Nineveh. Just to show you that, go back to Tobit 1 and 18.
The book of Tobit chapter 1 and verse 18. And if the king Sennacherib had slain any, when he was come and fled from Judea,
right, read.
I buried them privily, for in his wrath he killed many, but the bodies were not found when they were sought for of the king.
Right, so the point I want is that he returned back. This will show you this bridge the gap here. This is valid. Okay, this is saying the same thing.
All praises. Thank you. So now let's jump to Babylon. Okay, and once again, historically, you can look at world history, okay? You had a kingdom called the Assyrian Empire. After the Assyrian Empire, you had the Babylonian Empire, and we're going to read that again. And what I want y'all to see in these key points, like we referenced from Egypt earlier, Israel was in captivity in Egypt. When we read the Assyrian Empire, Israel was captive in Assyria. Now let's jump to Babylon. 2 Kings 24, verse 1.
The book of 2 Kings, chapter 24 and verse 1. In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Jehoiakim became his servant 3 years.
Right, so Jehoiakim became Nebuchadnezzar's servant 3 years. Give me chapter 25 and verse 1 and 2.
The book of 2 Kings, chapter 25 and verse 1. And it came to pass in the 9th year of his reign, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of the month, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his host, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it, and they built forts against it round about.
Right, so they're conquering the city. Go ahead.
And the city was besieged unto the 11th year of King Zedekiah.
Right, jump down to verse 11.
Verse 11. Now the rest of the people that were left in the city, and the fugitives that fell away to the king of Babylon, with the remnant of the multitude, did Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carry away.
He carried them away, captive. Go ahead.
But the captain of the guard left of the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen.
Right, and they always left a remnant behind. Okay, they never took every single soul. It was always a small remnant left behind. Give me verse 20.
Verse 20. And Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, took these and brought them to the king of Babylon to Riblah.
Now notice it says the captain of the guard. Again, Israel was carried captive. It's the same history we're reading through Egypt, Israel being captive, in Assyria, Israel being captive. Now Babylon, Israel being captive. Okay, there's a correlation here. Give me Daniel chapter 2 now. Okay. Now we read earlier that Tobit, in the Apocrypha, he was one of the, him and his family were carried captive into Assyria. The same thing happened to Daniel during the time of the Babylonian captivity. Read this, Daniel 2, verse 1.
The book of Daniel, chapter 2 and verse 1.
Go ahead.
And in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams, wherewith his spirit was troubled, and his sleep brake from him.
Right, so this is the same Nebuchadnezzar we just read about in 2 Kings chapter 24 and 25. Give me verse 31 of the same chapter.
Verse 31. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast and his arms of silver, his belly and his thighs of brass, his legs of iron, his feet part of iron and part of clay.
Right, so the king saw this image of gold, silver, brass, and iron. Read on.
Verse 34. Thou sawest till that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet, that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken to pieces together, and became like the shaft of the summer threshing floors.
Right, and that's talking about all those kingdoms. Babylon, Assyria, so forth and so on. Read.
And the wind carried them away.
Not Assyria, but Babylon, Persia, Greece, after Babylon. Go ahead.
That no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain.
So guess what that stone is? That stone is talking about Christ and his kingdom, okay, being established on earth, the kingdom of heaven. Read on.
And filled the whole earth.
It filled the whole earth. Jump to verse 38. Let's get the explanation from Daniel. Get the interpretation. Go ahead.
Verse 38. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven.
Well, just read 36 so we can just read it kind of quick.
Verse 36. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. All right. Verse 38. And wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all.
Talking to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Go ahead.
Thou art this head of gold.
He said, you, Nebuchadnezzar, are the head of gold. Go ahead.
Verse 39. And after thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee, and another third kingdom of brass.
Right, so now it's going to be another kingdom. That was the silver we read about earlier. Go ahead. And then it says a kingdom of brass afterwards. So you had gold, silver, brass. Read on.
Which shall bear rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces, and subdueth all things, and as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise.
So now, give me Baruch chapter 1, okay? Because we're reading about Daniel being captive in Babylon, okay? Give me Baruch chapter 1 in the Apocrypha, okay?
What verse?
1 and 1.
The book of Baruch, chapter 1 and verse 1. And these are the words of the book which Baruch, the son of Neriah, the son of Masias, the son of Sedekias, the son of Asadias, the son of Chelcias, wrote in Babylon.
Wrote what?
Wrote in Babylon.
He wrote in Babylon, okay? Wrote in Babylon. Go ahead.
In the 5th year, and in the 7th day of the month, what time as the Chaldeans took Jerusalem and burnt it with fire.
The same history you read about, okay, in 2 Kings. Okay, these two books correlate. The history is talking about the same time period. Okay, you got something on that also? You gonna
Let's get Jeremiah verse 36 first. 36. I want jump to verse 4, and then we're gonna jump to 17 and 18. So Jeremiah chapter 36 verse 4, and then we're gonna jump to 17 and 18.
The book of Jeremiah, chapter 36 and verse 4.
Okay.
Then Jeremiah called Baruch, the son of Neriah.
So this is the same Baruch we talking about in the Apocrypha, read.
And Baruch wrote from the mouth of Jeremiah all the words of the Lord, which he had spoken unto him upon a roll of a book.
So that's the book of Baruch. All right, go ahead. Now jump to 17 and 18.
Verse 17. And they asked Baruch, saying, Tell us now, how didst thou write all these words at his mouth? Then Baruch answered them, He pronounced all these words unto me with his mouth, and I wrote them with ink in the book.
Just understanding that our forefathers, because we are the Israelites, they wrote our history in books, or back then it was papyrus. So I just want to give some history. The word Bible means composition of books. So the Bible has the records of all our forefathers, and it's not even in chronological order. I actually have that in this book right here. I definitely want to get it real quick. The book is called, you go ahead.
It says, Illustrated Encyclopedia of the Bible Facts, written by J.J. Parker.
All right, so J.J. Parker in page, let's see what page this is, 610 says, the books of the Bible are not arranged in the order in which they are written. And then when you read this page, it has 2nd Maccabees, Ecclesiasticus, Judith, Prayer, Manassas, 2nd Esdras, has all the hidden books. It's letting you know that they are canon.
Right. Let me get Susanna one real quick. Let's get through Babylon real quick, and then I want to get the call-in number for the listeners real quick. Susanna chapter 1, verse 1.
The book of the history of Susanna, chapter 1 and verse 1. There dwelt a man in Babylon called Joachim, and he took a wife whose name was Susanna, the daughter of Chelcias, a very fair woman.
Now the point I wanted is verse 1. Read it one more time.
The book of the history of Susanna, chapter 1 and verse 1. There dwelt a man in Babylon called Joachim.
Right. So this is talking about in Babylon, there was a man named Joachim. Go ahead.
And he took a wife whose name was Susanna.
Now, give me verse 45. Again, this is referencing the Babylonian captivity. Verse 45. Go ahead.
The history of Susanna, chapter 1 and verse 1. Chapter 1 and verse 45.
Yep.
Therefore, when she was led to be put to death, the Lord raised up the Holy Spirit of a young youth whose name was Daniel, who cried with a loud voice, I am clear from the blood of this woman.
So we're referencing Daniel. This is the same Daniel we read about in the quote-unquote Old Testament. That same Daniel is this same history here. Okay, that particular history correlates, all right? The Apocrypha is canon. The history of Susanna is canon. Give me Bel and the Dragon real quick. Jump over. Read verse 1.
The book of the history of the destruction of Bel and the Dragon, chapter 1 and verse 1. And King Astyages was gathered to his fathers, and Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom, and Daniel conversed with the king.
So notice it says here, the Cyrus of Persia received his kingdom. We're going to read about that in a little bit. Go ahead.
Verse 2. And Daniel conversed with the king, and was honored above all his friends. Now the Babylonians had an idol called Bel, and there were spent upon him every day 12 great measures of fine flour, and 40 sheep, and 6 vessels of wine.
So, okay, this history correlates with the book of Daniel. This is the reason why he ended up, when you read in Daniel, he was thrown in the lion's den. This particular history correlates with that. Okay, so yes, this book also is canon. Now, let's get the call-in number real quick.
Right. If you want to call in today, the call-in number is 252-435-2554. Again, the number is 252-435-2554. Please call in for any questions or comments.
Right. Now, give me Prayer Manassas real quick. Prayer Manassas. You know what? It's too much reading there. Give me 2nd Chronicles, and we'll reference it from that point. 2nd Chronicles 33 and 18.
The book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 33 and verse 18. Now the rest of the acts of Manasseh and his prayer unto his God.
It says now that the rest of the acts of who?
Manasseh and his prayer unto
and his prayer. This is key. And his prayer. Go ahead.
Unto his God. And the words of the seers that spake to him.
Yep.
In the name of the Lord God of Israel.
Yep.
Behold, they are written in
his prayer is written where?
In the book of the kings of Israel. His prayer also, and how God was entreated of him, and all his sin, and his trespass, in the places wherein he built high places, and set up groves and graven images.
Go ahead.
Before he was humbled. Behold, they are written among the sayings of the seers.
His prayer is written in the sayings of the seers. The sayings of the seers. That word seer means prophets, okay? The seers, meaning they foresee things. So that book right there, the sayings of the seers, is referencing the book called the Apocrypha. That was the original term before it was called the Apocrypha, the sayings of the seers. All right? Now give me that little prelude right after, yeah.
Okay.
Prayer of Manassas real quick.
This is the on the title of the prayer of Manassas, king of Judah, when he was holding captive in Babylon.
Right. So the prayer of Manassas is referencing when he was captive in Babylon. It's talking about the same time period with Daniel, the history of Susanna, Bel and the Dragon, so forth and so on. All same time period.
All right, give me in the same chapter we read here in 2 Chronicles. I want you to give me 2 Chronicles, chapter 33, verse 12.
The book of 2 Chronicles. The book of 2 Chronicles, chapter 33 and verse 12. And when he was in affliction, he besought the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers.
Right. So he humbled himself. Why? Because he was wicked. He was doing what he was doing evil things. Read.
And prayed unto him, and he was entreated of him, and heard his supplication, and brought him again to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. Then Manasseh knew that the Lord, he was God.
So he knew that he was God. So now what you would do, you see chapter 12 and chapter 13, in between them two verses, you're supposed to put this is like a puzzle piece. You put the prayer of Manasseh. This is what he was praying. This go further in depth. What his prayer was, what he said, what happened, and then the Most High heard him out. Okay, I got some more. Also, I want you to go to in the Apocrypha, page 108, for those who don't have the song of the three holy children. We're gonna read the little thing here, because it gives you references where to go to when you read about the three holy children, or the history of Susanna, Bel and the Dragon. So we're gonna get all these read.
The song of the three holy children, which followeth in the 3rd chapter of Daniel, after this place.
So after this place, so now when you go to the Daniel chapter 3, it's gonna tell you the verses. Read.
Fell down, bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Verse 23.
So when you get verse 23, you'll see that. Then it's gonna give you in between verse 23 and verse 24. So read on.
That which followeth is not in the Hebrew, to wit, and they walked unto these words. Then Nebuchadnezzar, verse 24.
And it jumps to Nebuchadnezzar, verse 24, because remember this is in Greek. So now give me history of Susanna. Read the title and read the little message there below.
The history of Susanna, set apart from the beginning of Daniel.
Set apart from the beginning of Daniel. This will be considered Daniel chapter 1, because Daniel was a young child. He was young. He was a young adolescent in this book.
Right.
Read.
Because it is not in the Hebrew.
Because it's in Greek. Read.
As neither the narration of Bel and the Dragon.
Just like Bel and the Dragon, right? So now go to Bel and the Dragon, read that little message.
The history of the destruction of Bel and the Dragon, cut off from the end of Daniel.
Right, so this will be the last chapter of Daniel, okay? So it was cut off. So they took this stuff out, so you don't know your history, okay? That's all.
Okay, thank you. So now let's jump to Daniel. Let's go to Daniel chapter 5. Okay, let's jump to the next captivity, okay, which is the Persian and Mede captivity. Let's see what happened. Daniel 5, verse 30 and 31.
Right. The book of Daniel, chapter 5 and verse 30. In that night was Belshazzar, the king of the Chaldeans, slain.
Now we read about Nebuchadnezzar. This is down the line. He had another king that took over called Belshazzar. Okay, go ahead.
And Darius the Median took the kingdom,
It says Darius the Median took the kingdom. Go ahead.
being about 62 years old.
Right, so Darius the Median. Jump to chapter 6 and verse 8. Daniel chapter 6, verse 8.
The book of Daniel, chapter 6 and verse 8. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it be not changed according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which altereth not.
And that's the point I wanted. The law of the Medes and Persians. So after Babylon, you read about the Medes and Persians, or Persian and Mede Empire. This is history. During this time, what are we reading about? Israel being captive under them as well. Give me chapter 10, Daniel chapter 10, verse 1. And that point you referenced earlier about the Bible not being in chronological order, the book of Daniel within itself is not in chronological order. Okay, it jumps back and forth in different parts of history. Daniel 10, verse 1.
The book of Daniel, chapter 10 and verse 1.
Yep.
In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia.
That's all I wanted right there. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia. So we read about Darius the Mede taking over, and then we read about Cyrus the Persian. This is a joint empire or a dual empire. Give me first Esdras in the Apocrypha, okay, to read the same thing. First Esdras chapter 1, verse 56, I believe.
The book of First Esdras, chapter 1 and verse 56. And as for her glorious things, they never ceased till they had consumed and brought them all to naught. And the people that were not slain with the sword he carried unto Babylon.
Right, we read about that. Them being carried to Babylon. Watch this.
Who became servants to him and his children.
So once again, Israel was servant in Babylon. Go ahead.
Till the Persians reigned.
Yep.
To fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremy.
And guess what? Jeremiah prophesied about both of those things. Okay. Give me 2nd Esdras chapter 7. Okay. Verse 28.
The book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 7 and verse 28.
This is prophetic. We'll get to this in a second, but I just want to touch it now. Go ahead.
For my son Jesus shall be revealed with those that be with him, and they that remain shall rejoice within 400 years.
Right. So, and why is it saying 400 years? Because the Persian Empire was around 500 BC. Okay. It's saying within 400 years. What about it again? Read it again.
It's, the book of 2nd Esdras, chapter 7 and verse 28. For my son Jesus shall be revealed.
My son Jesus shall be revealed. Go ahead.
With those that be with him.
The disciples. Go ahead.
And they that remain shall rejoice within 400 years.
Within 400 years. This particular prophecy will come to pass within 400 years. So, yes, from 500 BC down, okay, you get around 0 or 1 BC, around the time that Christ came on the scene. So this was prophetic, okay, historically accurate. Once again, archaeology proves that the Persian and Medes reigned during that time period. Jump back to Daniel chapter 8. So now we're just touching on that Esdras within itself is canon, okay? That is part of the Bible for reference. Okay, Daniel chapter 8, verse 3.
The book of Daniel, chapter 8 and verse 3. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns.
Go ahead.
And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other.
Go ahead.
And the higher came up last.
Yep.
I saw the ram pushing westward, and northward, and southward.
So now, just for reference, we go back to that statue we read about: gold, silver, brass, and iron. Okay, the gold is Babylon, the silver is the Persian and Medes, which is this ram here. Read on.
So that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand.
What verse you at?
Verse 4.
Okay, read 3 again.
Verse 3. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns.
Now the 2 horns is representing the Persian and Medes. That's why it says a ram with 2 horns. It was an empire it was a joint ruling empire. Okay, that's why I had 2 horns, but it was one animal. Go ahead.
And the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last.
And we read that earlier, that Cyrus the Persian came last after Darius the Mede. Historically accurate. Go ahead.
I saw the ram pushing westward, and northward, and southward, so that no beast might stand before him.
Now, jump to verse 20.
Verse 20.
Let's see what this is talking about.
The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia.
Right, it's telling you right there, plain as day. The horns is Media and Persia. Go ahead.
Verse 21. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia.
The king of what?
King of Grecia.
The rough goat is the king of Grecia. Go ahead.
And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king.
Okay, so now we're going to jump to the book of Maccabees in the Apocrypha. Okay, it said there, and the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Okay, the king of Greece. This is the brass. Okay, the brass on that particular statue that the king saw. First Maccabees 1:1.
The first book of the Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim.
Now notice how it says, and it happened. What is that? What is that talking about? Why is it just jumping to, and it happened? It's talking about the prophecy we just read about in Daniel. And it happened. It's saying prophecy being fulfilled here. Read it again.
The first book of the Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes.
So pause right there. Let's jump back to Daniel 8. Get Daniel 8.
Yeah,
and just hold that.
8 and 1.
3? Nah, where we stopped
Okay.
at? 20?
21. It says, and the rough goat is the king of the Grecia.
Read the verse above it.
Verse 20.
Yep.
The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia.
Yep. Go ahead.
And the rough goat is the king of Grecia.
So notice, it's telling you here that the king of Greece took over the Medes right here in Daniel. We now read Maccabees again.
The first book of the Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece.
Now, who is this Alexander talking about? It's talking about Alexander, the so-called Great. Alexander the Greek. This is historically accurate. But guess what? This is written in the Bible. Okay, you're reading about the Babylonian Empire, the Persian and Mede. Well, we started with Assyria, then Babylon, Persian and Mede. Now we're reading about the Greek Empire being established. This is history on earth. Okay, read on.
Verse 2. And made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth.
Yep.
And went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations.
Jump down to verse 7.
Verse 7. So Alexander reigned 12 years, and then died.
Yep.
And his servants...
So this is around 323 BC, roughly around there. Go ahead.
And his servants bare rule, every one in his place.
Right, his 4 generals took over. Read on.
And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So did their sons after them many years.
Yep.
And evils were multiplied in the earth.
Right, it says when the Greek Empire took over, it says evils were multiplied in the earth. Not civilization began. It says evils were multiplied in the earth. Okay? So yes, this book is historically accurate. There's archaeology to prove that Alexander the Greek existed, right?
So it contradicts history that we get taught in school. You know what I'm saying? That they're the beginning of civilization.
Right. The Bible doesn't say that. Read that last verse again, verse 9, the last part.
Verse 9. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years.
Yep.
And evils were multiplied in the earth.
Evils were multiplied in the earth. Now, get me First Maccabees chapter 4. Okay. This is during the Greek Empire. This is what happened here during the Greek Empire. First Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 54.
The first Maccabees chapter 4.
You know what? Let's just jump to Let's start at 54.
First Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 54. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it.
Now the heathen just means the nations. The nations outside of Israel, they're called heathen in the Bible. Go ahead.
Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals.
Mm-hmm. This is talking about the temple of God. Okay, they profaned it. Now they're rededicating it back to the Most High. Read on.
Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven,
Yep.
who had given them good success.
Uh-huh.
And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days.
They kept the what?
They kept the dedication of the altar 8 days.
Now, this is called the Feast of Dedication right here. It says they kept the dedication of the altar. How many days?
8 days.
Go ahead.
And offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise.
Right. So just to add this, the word dedication, that's when you hear Hanukkah. Hanukkah just means dedication in Hebrew.
Yeah, I got something real quick. Last week we brought this book out. You can find it in your local Walmarts. It's called Rose Book of Bible Charts, Maps, and Timelines, right?
Read it one more time.
Rose Book of Bible Charts, Maps, and Timelines. This is the 10th anniversary, all right? When you jump to page 121, it goes into the image of the statue that Daniel goes into. It ties into everything this class was going into. I want to read this part right here. It says, from 175 to 163 BC, Seleucus ruled Antiochus Epiphanes tried to force Jews to abandon their laws and adopt Greek culture. Maccabees won in 164 BC, and the temple was cleansed and rededicated. This rededication is celebrated every year as Hanukkah.
Gotcha. This dedication is celebrated as Hanukkah. Like the officer said, Hanukkah in Hebrew means dedication. Okay? Go back to that.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 57. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold, and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them.
Right.
Thus was there very great gladness among the people.
This is Israel, among the people of Israel. Go ahead.
For that the reproach of the heathen was put away.
Right. They put away the reproach of the other nations, the Greeks, okay, during this time period, the Greek Empire. Go ahead.
Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the day of the dedication of the altar...
It says they ordained. This is an ordinance, okay? An ordinance is a law, all right? They ordained that the what?
That the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 5th and 20th day of the month Caslu, with mirth and gladness.
Right. So they ordained the Feast of Dedication or Hanukkah to be kept in their season. So now, let's jump to the master precept. Okay. All of us call ourselves Christians, quote unquote, meaning it means the anointed ones, but we know it as, okay, we follow Christ. We call ourselves Christians, but it means the anointed ones. So if we follow Christ, we have to do what he did. Let's see what he did in John chapter 10.
The book of John, chapter 10 and verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dead.
Before we read that, get chapter 11, and let's find out what time period we're reading about here. Chapter 11, verse 48.
The book of John, chapter 11 and verse 48. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him.
Yep.
And the Romans,
Go ahead.
shall come and take away both our place and nation.
So now, this is after the Greek Empire we read about in Maccabees. Now we're reading about the Roman Empire in the book of John. Give me chapter 10 again.
The book of John, chapter 10 and verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem, the feast of the dedication.
The what?
The feast of the dedication. And it was winter. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch.
So wait a minute. This don't say Christmas?
The feast of the dedication.
And it was what season?
And it was winter. And Jesus walked in the temple in Solomon's porch.
So wait a minute. Jesus the Christ, the anointed Savior, kept the feast of dedication. He kept that feast. This is what it's saying right here in John chapter 10. He walked into the temple to keep the feast of dedication in wintertime. Not Christmas. The feast of dedication, or like the officer said, Hanukkah in Hebrew. Now, if Christ kept this, where was it instituted before the book of Maccabees? You won't find it anywhere. It's only written in the book of the Maccabees. So if Christ kept the Feast of Dedication, that validates the book of the Maccabees, okay?
Yeah, I'm going to read this definition. Like this out of my Bible here. It says dedication feast of, and it says feast of dedication. This is the definition. An 8-day festival observing the victories of Judas Maccabeus. You're only going to read about Judas and the Apocrypha. And the purification and rededication of the temple, which it referenced John 10:22, also called Feast of Lights, Hanukkah.
Right. Feast of Lights or Hanukkah. Go ahead.
All right, one more fun fact from the book, Rose Book of Bible Charts, Maps, and Timelines. This is page 104. It gives you the feast days. Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah. The Feast of Dedication celebrates the Maccabees' victory over the Greeks and the rededication of the temple in 165 BC. The Maccabees' victory is recorded in the books of Maccabees in the Apocrypha. John chapter 10, verse 22. John tells us that it is celebrated in Jesus' day.
All right. Give me real quick the Zondervan Bible. I want the King James Version real quick. See if we can get that in real quick. Okay.
This is the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, and we're on page 86. King James Version. When Elizabeth died in 1603...
Can you get to the point where it says 47? Just jump to that point.
47 of the best Hebrew and Greek scholars...
This is going into how the Bible was translated. Go ahead.
...of the day were divided into 6 groups.
So they had 47 scholars. They were divided into 6 groups. Go ahead.
3 for the Old Testament.
3 groups translated the Old Testament. Go ahead.
2 for the New.
2 groups translated the New Testament.
And 1 for the Apocrypha.
And 1 for what?
And 1 for the Apocrypha.
And 1 group translated the Apocrypha. So yes, during the original 1611, when it was translated in 1611, okay, the Apocrypha was in it. It was also in the Latin Vulgate, okay, or the Septuagint, okay. It was in all the Bibles prior to about the 1700s, okay, when they stripped it out. That's why it's called hidden or Apocrypha now. Originally called the Sayings of the Seers, which we reference in 2 Chronicles.
All the Catholics, also the Catholics, they have it. The Catholics have the Apocrypha in their Bible. If you go to any state, like any place like Mexico, Puerto Rico, they have the Apocrypha in their Bibles. Go ahead. Okay, and today that's gonna end it for today. Appreciate you for tuning in to Israel United in Christ. Again, if you want to contact us, our information is www.israelunite.org. That's our website. Again, one more time, www.israelunite.org. If you want to contact us, our phone number is 855-484-4842, extension 798. Again, that number is 855-484-4842, extension 798.
So yeah, we're hoping you guys got something out of the lesson. So yes, the Apocrypha is canon. That is part of the Bible. So get yours so you can get more edified on the history that's left out. Okay, because when you jump to the New Testament, for example, you're talking about Greeks and so forth, you have no idea what it's talking about. It's referencing the book called the Maccabees. So with that, we say shalom.
Shalom.
We used to scream black power while Heron was pushed. But at the end of the day, nothing's in vain. IUIC has been given a vision. The tents of Judah has risen. Many has attempted the mission, minor murmuring, omitting, and missing the mark. Just reading that he had the flame of fire in his eyes gave us the spark. We on Paul's mission. We out on the road, purple and gold, from Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, Ghana, Sierra Leone. 144,000 boots banging, concrete crackling. These are our men repented at heart. The scriptures is proof. IUIC, we deliver the truth.